The crystalline gardens of Kraxos Prime sparkled under the light of three moons, their surfaces reflecting countless stars across meticulously maintained grounds. General Voss of the Craxian Elite Guard stood among his most trusted officers, raising an ornate glass filled with luminescent nectar. The annual Ancestors' Feast was a time of celebration, a moment when even the most hardened warriors lowered their guard to honor those who came before. Security drones hummed quietly overhead, their sensors sweeping the area in predictable patterns. The general's personal shield shinned around him, barely visible except when starlight caught its edges. Every entrance was guarded, every angle covered, every possible threat accounted for. Or so they thought. 2 kilometers away, nestled within the twisted spires of an abandoned communication tower, a human lay perfectly still. The sniper's breath was steady, measured in perfect 4-second intervals that matched the subtle fluctuations in the planet's magnetic field. Through the scope, the general's celebration appeared close enough to touch. Target located, the sniper whispered into their neural link, awaiting optimal conditions. The response came back as a soft vibration through bone conduction. Confirmed. You have authority to proceed when ready. Remember, this one needs to send a message. The human's lips curved slightly. They had been in position for 73 hours, studying the patterns of wind and gravity, learning the rhythm of the security systems, and waiting for this precise moment. Their muscles hadn't twitched once in all that time, a feat that had made human snipers legendary across the galaxy. Through the scope, General Voss began his traditional speech. The sniper's finger rested lightly on the trigger, applying exactly 0 pressure. Not yet. The shot would need to pierce 17 distinct atmospheric layers, navigate through 3 overlapping security fields, and strike at exactly the right moment to achieve the desired effect. The general raised his glass higher. To those who built our empire. The sniper's breathing slowed further. To those who maintained our honor. The scope adjusted automatically for temperature variance. And to those whoa. The shot, when it came, made less noise than a whisper. The custom-made projectile split the air molecules around it, riding the magnetic currents like a leaf on the wind. It passed through gaps in the security grid that existed for less than microseconds, curved around the general's personal shield using its own energy frequency, and struck the raised glass precisely at its resonance point. The crystalline vessel shattered in a spectacular display, its fragments catching the starlight like 1,000 falling diamonds. In the sudden silence that followed, General Voss looked down at his empty hand in confusion. Then at the small, neat hole in his chest. His expression never changed as he fell. Chaos erupted in the garden. Security drones activated their highest alert protocols. Guards rushed to cover their fallen leader. Medical teams appeared with emergency equipment. But it was already too late. The sniper waited, completely motionless, as search patterns filled the sky. They watched through their scope as the general's body was taken away, as investigators began their futile search for evidence, as the garden was sealed off for examination. Only after 3 more hours, when the initial frenzy had died down, did they finally move. The rifle was disassembled with practiced precision, each piece disappearing into specially designed compartments. Within minutes, there was no trace anyone had ever been there. No spent cartridge, no thermal signature, no displaced dust. Just another shadow among shadows. Message delivered, the sniper reported quietly, already moving through pre-planned evacuation routes. The Craxians will find the data packet embedded in their security logs when they investigate the shield failure. They'll know exactly why their general had to die. In the coming days, stories would spread across the sector. Stories of impossible shots and invisible hunters. Stories of human snipers who could bend physics and break morale with a single pull of the trigger. But for now, there was only silence, darkness, and the lingering echo of shattered crystal in the night air. Senior researcher Zixtal adjusted his primary optical sensors for the 100th time, mandibles clicking in frustration as he reviewed the simulation yet again. Behind him, the assembled experts of the Stellar Assembly's Advanced Warfare Division watched the holographic replay with equal parts fascination and disbelief. Impossible, declared Professor Venerx, her crystalline form shimmering with agitation. The shot curved through 3 distinct gravity wells. Even our most advanced targeting systems cannot calculate such trajectories in real time. The simulation played again. A single projectile, barely larger than a grain of sand, threading its way through security grids, riding magnetic currents, and somehow, impossibly, maintaining enough kinetic energy to shatter reinforced crystal at precisely its resonance frequency. Yet it happened, Zixtal responded, bringing up additional data streams. And this isn't an isolated incident. We've collected 23 similar reports from across the sector, all confirmed human sniper operations. The gathered scientists watched as new trajectories appeared in the simulation, each one seemingly defying the laws of physics. A shot that waited for 2 planetary rotations before striking its target. Another that used the solar flare as cover. A third that somehow predicted where its target would be 3 seconds in the future. The humans call it reading the wind, a quiet voice said from the back of the room. The assembled researchers turned to face Commander Liss, one of the few survivors of a human sniper encounter. Her scales still bore the faint discoloration of stress markings. They say their best snipers can feel the currents of space itself. Zixtal brought up the commander's incident report. The holographic display showed a defensive position that had been considered impregnable. 15 shots over 3 weeks, each one finding its mark through gaps in security that existed for fractions of a second. Their technology isn't significantly advanced, Professor Venerx noted, analyzing the weapon specifications. These are kinetic projectiles, albeit highly engineered ones. The rifles themselves are elegant but not beyond our understanding. It's the operators. Somehow, they're achieving results that our targeting computers calculate as statistically impossible. New data streamed into the display as field reports arrived from across the galaxy. A human sniper on Nexus Prime, maintaining position for 6 days without movement. Another on the ice world of Kelvin 9, matching their breathing to the planet's magnetic pulse to avoid detection. A third who eliminated a high-value target through a magnetic storm that should have disrupted any possible targeting system. They're not using targeting computers, Commander Liss said, her voice hollow with remembered fear. At least, not primarily. They calculate everything in their heads. Wind speed, gravity fluctuations, target movement, atmospheric density. They process it all instinctively, like it's some kind of art form. The room fell silent as this implication sank in. The idea that human minds could process such complex variables intuitively seemed as impossible as the shots themselves. There's more, Zixtal added, bringing up one final data set. We've analyzed the psychological impact. Every confirmed human sniper operation has had an effect radius far beyond the actual casualties. Entire battle groups have changed their strategies, knowing a single human might be watching. The mere possibility of their presence alters the behavior of every species they encounter. Professor Venerx's crystalline surface clouded with concern. You're saying they've weaponized fear itself? No, Commander Liss corrected, watching another simulation of the shot that killed General Voss. They've weaponized possibility. Every soldier in the galaxy now knows that at any moment, from any distance, through any defense, death might be watching through a scope. The shot that kills you will be one you never see, never hear, and never had a chance to prevent. The assembled experts watched the simulation one final time. The impossible shot, the perfect trajectory, the precise calculation of variables that their most advanced computers struggled to process. Recommendations, Zixtal asked finally. Commander Liss turned away from the display, her scales rippling with remembered tension. Pray they stay neutral in the coming conflicts, because if they don't, she left the thought unfinished, but everyone in the room understood. In the simulation, the crystalline glass shattered one more time, scattering light like stars across a universe that suddenly felt much more dangerous. Dr. Merixis peered through her observation screen at the human subject in the testing chamber. For 6 hours, the volunteer sniper hadn't moved a single muscle. Even more remarkably, their brain patterns showed perfect alertness despite the complete physical stillness. Fascinating, she whispered, her tendrils rippling with scientific excitement. Their respiratory rate has matched the ambient magnetic frequency of our facility. I didn't even know that was possible. Her research partner, Specialist Karn, monitored a different set of readings. Their eye movement is even more interesting. Look at how they track multiple targets simultaneously while maintaining primary focus. The level of peripheral awareness is off our established scales. The human in the chamber continued their vigil, showing no sign they were aware of being studied. Their position remained perfect, their breathing steady, their focus absolute. To the researchers, it was like observing a machine, except that machines couldn't adapt with such fluid precision. Begin the next phase, Dr. Merixis instructed. The testing chamber's environment shifted subtly. Temperature gradients changed. Air currents altered their patterns. Magnetic fields wobbled in random sequences. The human adjusted to each change without conscious thought, their body automatically compensating for the new variables. It's not just their physical capabilities, Karn noted, reviewing the neural scans. Their brains process environmental data in ways we've never seen. They're not calculating trajectories, they're feeling them. The observation continued as new challenges were introduced. Moving targets appeared at random intervals. The human tracked each one without moving, their mind calculating lead times and trajectory intersections instinctively. Dr. Merixis activated the neural interface. Subject Echo, please verbalize your target acquisition process. The human's voice came through calm and measured, without breaking their concentration. Primary target moving 17 degrees east, accounting for third-level air current shift. Secondary target will cross the primary's path in 3 seconds, creating a momentary targeting window. Tertiary target's evasion pattern has a predictable flaw at the apex of their role. And you can track all of these simultaneously. Yes, it's like watching raindrops fall. You don't calculate where each drop will land. You just know. The researchers exchanged glances. The casual confidence in the human's voice was perhaps more unsettling than their capabilities. This wasn't bravado, it was simply fact. What about the stillness? Karn asked. How do you maintain such perfect positioning for extended periods? We learned it from hunting, the human replied. Long before we had technology, we had to track prey across vast distances. Success meant waiting for the perfect moment. Those who couldn't stay still didn't eat. Those who couldn't read the wind didn't survive. We evolved to become living calculations. Dr. Merixis initiated the final test sequence. The chamber filled with interference patterns designed to confuse targeting systems. To the human, it made no difference. Their awareness remained absolute, their focus unbroken. They're not overcoming their biological limitations, she realized, mandibles clicking in excitement. They're using them. The micro tremors in their muscles that should interfere with accuracy. They use them to sense air currents, the natural sway of their pulse. It helps them time their shots between heartbeats. Karn added new data to their findings. Their predatory instincts, heightened awareness, pattern recognition capabilities, it's all interconnected. Every perceived weakness turned into an advantage through millions of years of evolution. The human in the chamber finally moved, the motion so smooth it seemed to flow like liquid. Test complete, they announced. All targets acquired. 37 confirmed strike trajectories calculated. Would you like me to list them? That won't be necessary, Dr. Merixis responded, her scientific excitement now tinged with something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like primal fear. We have what we need. As the human left the testing chamber, the researchers stared at their results. They had come seeking to understand what made human snipers so effective. Instead, they had discovered something far more profound. Humanity itself was a precision instrument, honed by evolution into the perfect synthesis of hunter and killer. The question was no longer how they did it, but what it meant for a galaxy that suddenly seemed much smaller, much darker, and much more dangerous. The cargo hold of the merchant vessel Star Wanderer hummed with nervous energy as species from across the galaxy shared their stories. The ship had been delayed at the Nexus Junction for 3 days due to security concerns, and everyone knew what that meant. Human snipers had been spotted in the sector. My cousin served on the mineral platform in the Haraxis Belt. A Valerian merchant whispered, his bioluminescent patterns flickering with anxiety. They lost 6 executive officers in 2 weeks. No one ever saw the shooter. The platform's sensors never detected anything. Just crack and another body. A meridian crystal former shifted her facets uneasily. That's nothing. In the Cygnus Reach, a human sniper held an entire mining operation hostage without firing a single shot. 3 weeks of operations completely halted because no one would step outside the shielded areas. The company lost millions. The stories continued as the delay stretched on. Each tale seemed more impossible than the last, yet all carried that ring of truth that made them truly terrifying. Like Thalan Trademaster, his scales dark with remembered fear, spoke of a siege on the ice world of Novaria. They found the position after it was over, he said, his voice barely audible. The human had melted into the ice sheet itself, staying perfectly still as the frozen water reformed around them. 17 days without moving. The ice had to be cut away from their suit, but they got their target. The ship's sensors hummed a gentle all clear, but no one moved toward the exits. The stories continued, each species adding their own encounter to the growing mythology of human snipers. They say humans can smell fear through their scopes, a young Zexian pilot offered. No, countered a grizzled Taurian mercenary. It's worse than that. They learn your patterns, study your habits. By the time they take the shot, they know you better than you know yourself. A silence fell as Commander Vexler of the Praetorian Guard entered the hold. His ceremonial armor bore the marks of countless battles, but his eyes held a haunted look that commanded attention. You want to know what makes human snipers truly terrifying? He asked, settling his massive frame against a cargo container. It's not the kills, it's the messages they send with each shot. The assembled travelers leaned in closer as the commander continued. I lost my entire command staff on Helios Prime. 1 shot each. First was our tactical officer, taken while drinking his morning stimulant. The cup shattered in a specific pattern. We later learned it was the ancient human military symbol for silence. His claws traced the pattern unconsciously as he spoke. Next was our logistics chief. The shot came through her personal terminal, just as she was authorizing a weapons shipment. The impact pattern spelled out greed in human letters. Each death carried a message, a judgment. They weren't just killing us. They were telling a story with our deaths. A maintenance drone buzzed through the hold, making several species jump. The commander watched their reactions with grim understanding. The worst part, the messages weren't for us. They were for everyone else. Each death was choreographed to send ripples through the ranks, to make everyone wonder if they might be next and what their death might say about them. The Valerian merchant's patterns had dimmed to almost nothing. How do you fight something like that? You don't, the commander replied. You can't fight a shadow. You can't outmaneuver a ghost. Somewhere out there, right now, a human sniper is watching someone through their scope. The target is going about their day, never knowing that their every movement is being recorded, analyzed, understood. And when the shot finally comes, it won't just end a life. It will tell a story that will echo across the stars. The ship's all clear sounded again. Slowly, nervously, the passengers began to move toward their destinations. But their eyes kept scanning the shadows, and every unexpected sound made them flinch. Because now they all shared the same terrible knowledge. In a galaxy full of monsters, nothing was more frightening than a patient human with a scope and a story to tell. The remote moon's thin atmosphere made every breath count. Through her targeting scope, Master Surgeon Chen watched the latest group of alien students attempting to master the basics of human sniper techniques. Their frustration radiated off them in waves visible through the thermal imaging. You're trying too hard, she said softly into the comm link. Stop fighting your instincts. Become part of the environment. Below her observation post, a Zenthi named Kex showed the most promise. Unlike his companions, he had remained in position for 6 hours, barely moving. His species' natural crystalline structure caught the starlight, but he had learned to angle his facets to deflect attention rather than attract it. "Tell me what you see," Chen transmitted to Kex. The Zenthi's response came back in measured tones. "The target is 2.7 kilometers distant, moving in a repeating pattern. Wind variables are shifting every 3 minutes. Magnetic interference from the planet's core is creating a spiral pattern in the upper atmosphere." "And what do you feel?" A pause. "I don't understand the question, instructor." Chen smiled slightly. This was always the hardest part to teach. "Close your eyes. Don't think about the target. Think about the space between you and the target. What does the distance feel like?" The other students had already given up for the day, their patience exhausted. But Kex remained, his crystalline form perfectly still as he processed the question. After several minutes, his response came back different. Softer. Understanding. "The distance, it sings," he said. "Every particle of air, every magnetic wave, every gravity fluctuation, they're all connected. The path to the target isn't a straight line. It's a dance." "Now you're beginning to understand," Chen replied. "This is why so few species master our techniques. They try to calculate. We feel. They try to force. We flow." The targeting range stretched out before them, a complex maze of atmospheric anomalies, gravitational eddies, and magnetic storms. It was designed to be impossible to shoot through with traditional methods. But Chen had made the shot earlier that day, threading a projectile through gaps that existed for microseconds, riding energy waves that shouldn't have been navigable. "Your people believe we're somehow superior," Chen continued, watching Kex process this new understanding. "We're not. We've simply learned to stop fighting the universe and start dancing with it. Every shot is a conversation with physics. Every target acquisition is a relationship with time and space." Kex's crystalline structure vibrated in harmony with the magnetic field, a technique he had developed on his own. "The others think this is about killing, but it's not, is it? This is about understanding." "Precisely." Chen adjusted her position fractionally, compensating for the moon's rotation. "A human sniper doesn't just take life. We study it. We learn everything about our target, their patterns, their habits, their essence. By the time we take the shot, we know it better than they know themselves." Through her scope, Chen watched Kex process this revelation. His crystalline form had stopped trying to hide from the starlight and instead began to use it, bending the light around him in subtle ways that made him harder to spot than any artificial camouflage. "Take the shot when you're ready," she instructed. "Don't calculate the trajectory. Feel it." The silence stretched for another hour. Chen waited patiently, understanding the magnitude of the moment. Finally, Kex's weapon whispered once. Through her scope, Chen watched the target drone 2 kilometers away spin gracefully, a perfect hit through its central processor. "How?" Kex asked, his voice filled with wonder. "The shot should have been impossible through those magnetic turbulences." "You stopped trying to overcome the turbulence," Chen replied. "You became part of it. That's the secret we've been trying to teach the galaxy. Distance isn't an obstacle to be conquered. It's a medium to be embraced." As the moon's weak sun set, casting long shadows across the training ground, Chen reflected on the day's progress. 1 student out of 50 had begun to understand. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Perhaps in time, the galaxy would learn that human snipers weren't feared because of their ability to deal death, but because of their intimate understanding of life itself. Fleet Commander Zalvis watched the holographic display with growing unease as another supply convoy diverted from its intended course. 3 weeks into the siege of Horizon Colony, and his perfect battle plan was unraveling one shot at a time. "Show me the pattern again," he commanded, his secondary eyes tracking multiple data streams simultaneously. The tactical officer brought up a time-lapse of the last 20 days of operations. The first shot had seemed inconsequential. A single transport's navigation array, disabled with surgical precision. The ship had been forced to dock for repairs, delaying its delivery by 6 hours. At the time, it had barely warranted a mention in the daily reports. Then came the second shot 3 days later. A communications relay, its central processor destroyed by a round that had somehow curved around its protective magnetic shield. The resulting signal disruption had forced 2 more convoys to alter their routes. "Magnify Sector 7, Zalvis ordered, his facial scales darkening as understanding began to dawn. "Overlay the supply chain analysis." The holographic display shifted, revealing an intricate web of causality. Each shot, each disruption, had created ripples through the entire siege operation. Convoys rerouted to avoid suspected sniper positions had burned extra fuel, requiring additional supply runs. Those extra runs had strained the maintenance schedules of their escort vessels. "They're not targeting our command structure," the tactical officer realized, her tendrils writhing in agitation. "They're attacking our logistics. Death by 1,000 cuts." The display showed the next sequence: a fuel line punctured with impossible precision, forcing an entire defensive squadron to withdraw for resupply. A life support regulator disabled, requiring the evacuation of a forward command post. Each shot calculated not just in terms of immediate effect, but in how it would force the fleet to respond. "One sniper," Zalvis muttered, his primary heart racing. All of this chaos from one human with a rifle. The tactical officer brought up the latest intelligence estimate. "We devoted 60% of our sensor coverage to sniper detection. 30% of our forces are assigned to counter-sniper operations. Morale is dropping as crews realize they could be targeted at any moment. And still, we haven't even confirmed their position." Another shot rang out across the battlefield. The holographic display updated in real time as a primary power coupling on their largest medical frigate suddenly failed. The ship's emergency systems engaged immediately, preventing any casualties, but now it would need to withdraw for repairs. "The precision," the tactical officer whispered. "They're not trying to kill us. They're conducting surgery on our entire operation." Zalvis studied the pattern again, his military training warring with his disbelief. Each shot had been perfectly calculated, not just in terms of ballistics, but in terms of strategic impact. The human sniper wasn't fighting the fleet. They were conducting a masterclass in systemic disruption. "New contact," a sensor operator called out. "Long-range projectile detected in Sector 12. The command center fell silent as they tracked the round's impossible trajectory. It curved through 3 different gravity wells, rode the electromagnetic wake of a passing drone, and threaded its way through a debris field that should have made any shot impossible. The target? A single power coupling on an otherwise unremarkable supply depot. The resulting cascade of security protocols would delay operations in that sector for at least 6 hours. "They're playing a game we don't even understand," Zalvis realized, watching his carefully planned siege continue to unravel. "Every shot is like a move on some vast board, with consequences we won't understand until it's too late." The tactical display continued to update, showing the cumulative effect of 3 weeks of precision strikes. Supply lines stretched to breaking point. Defense grids full of holes as ships withdrew for repairs. Command and control hampered by seemingly random communication disruptions. "Send the report to High Command," Zalvis ordered, his scales now almost black with stress. "Tell them?" He paused, watching another perfectly placed shot disable a sensor array. "Tell them we're not fighting a sniper. We're fighting an artist, and our entire fleet is their canvas." The classified report materialized on High Strategist Valeen's neural interface with the highest priority markers she had ever seen. Her crystalline form shifted through patterns of concern as she processed the findings from the galaxy's most advanced behavioral analysis team. Subject: Human Sniper Operations. Pattern Recognition Analysis. Classification Level Omega. The document began with a simple statement that made her core structure vibrate with unease. "We have been fundamentally wrong about human snipers from the beginning." Valine's private chamber adjusted its electromagnetic field as she settled in to study the report. The analysis team had spent 3 years studying every confirmed human sniper operation across known space. Their conclusion shattered every previous assumption about human warfare. "The shots are not the weapon," she read, her inner light dimming with each revelation. "They are merely the vocabulary. Every operation is a conversation, every campaign a story told through precision and patience." The report displayed a statistical analysis of target selection patterns. Valine watched as seemingly random data points assembled themselves into complex mathematical structures. Each shot, each target, each timing, all part of a vast interconnected web of meaning. "Consider Operation Starfall," the report continued. "We initially believed the human sniper was targeting our command structure. Analysis reveals that each shot altered our fleet's behavior in precisely calculated ways. The sniper wasn't eliminating leaders. They were conducting an orchestra of chaos with our entire battle group as their instrument." Valine accessed the attached combat footage. A series of shots, spread across 3 weeks, had transformed an efficient military operation into a paralyzed maze of second-guessing and paranoia. But the true genius lay in how each disruption forced responses that created new vulnerabilities. "Human snipers don't think in terms of individual targets," she read, understanding blooming like crystal formations in her mind. "They view entire battlefields as complex systems that can be manipulated through minimal input. A single well-placed shot can trigger cascade effects that reshape the entire strategic landscape." The analysis continued, revealing layers of sophistication that bordered on precognition. Human snipers didn't just read the battlefield, they read their opponent's psychology, culture, and organizational structures. Each shot was placed not just in physical space, but in the gaps between assumptions and expectations. Most significantly, the report emphasized, human snipers appear to operate on multiple temporal layers simultaneously. While executing immediate tactical objectives, they are simultaneously setting up strategic conditions that may not become apparent for weeks or months. Valine accessed a classified incident from the Helios campaign. A single human sniper had systematically dismantled an entire planetary defense network without ever targeting its critical infrastructure. Instead, they had created patterns of threat and uncertainty that caused the defenders to disable their own systems through overcautious safety protocols and paranoid security responses. In essence, she read, her crystalline form now resonating with a frequency of deep concern. Human snipers are not merely soldiers with exceptional aim. They are battlefield artists who paint with probability, sculpt with psychology, and compose with chaos. Every shot is a word, every operation a sentence, every campaign a story written in a language we are only beginning to understand. The final section of the report contained the behavioral analysis team's recommendations. Valine read them 3 times, each review deepening her understanding of their implications. Standard military doctrine is insufficient when dealing with human snipers. We must approach them not as combat elements, but as complex system manipulators. Every shot they take is merely the visible portion of a much deeper strategy. By the time we see the shot, they have already achieved their true objective. Valine closed the report and allowed her crystalline form to process its implications. The growing fear of human snipers across the galaxy had been based on their ability to kill with impunity from impossible distances. But the truth was far more terrifying. They weren't just killing, they were conducting symphony orchestras of strategic manipulation, with entire armies dancing to music only they could hear. The High Strategist initiated an emergency transmission to the Council. They needed to revolutionize their entire approach to warfare, because somewhere out there, human snipers were already setting up shots that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. The observation deck of the Galactic Archives hung suspended in high orbit above Earth, its crystalline walls designed to withstand both energy weapons and curious eyes. Senior archivist Melther reviewed the final additions to the most comprehensive study of human snipers ever assembled, knowing it would be his last act in office. His successor would find this report tomorrow, along with his resignation. The truth had become too heavy to bear alone. In conclusion, he wrote, his neural interface translating thoughts into text, humanity's mastery of precision warfare represents neither tactical superiority nor technological advancement. It is, instead, the perfect expression of their species' fundamental nature. Through the observation window, Earth's night side glittered with city lights. Somewhere down there, in that cradle of human evolution, the first hunters had learned to wait in perfect stillness for their prey. Those same skills now reached across light years. Their effectiveness stems not from their weapons, he continued, but from their unique perception of reality itself. Where other species see space as a barrier to be overcome, humans see it as a medium to be shaped. Where we perceive time as a constant flow, they treat it as a landscape to be traversed. The archives hummed quietly around him, storing the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 species. Yet none of them had produced anything quite like human snipers. Consider their evolutionary path. Persistence hunters who developed the ability to predict prey behavior across vast distances. Tool users who learned to extend their reach beyond physical limitations. Social creatures who mastered the art of reading intentions from the smallest behavioral cues. Melther paused, remembering his own encounter with a human sniper during the Persis conflict. He had never seen them, never heard the shot, only felt the wind of its passage as it struck the command console exactly 1 millimeter from his head, a warning that had ended his military career and started his scholarly one. But their true mastery lies in their understanding of interconnection. Every human sniper operation reveals this fundamental truth. They don't see battlefields as collections of discrete targets, but as webs of cause and effect. Each shot ripples through these webs, creating patterns that only they can fully anticipate. The lights of Earth continued their slow dance below as night shifted to day. Melther thought about all the species that had tried to replicate human sniper techniques. All had failed, not because they lacked skill or technology, but because they lacked the fundamental human perspective. Their patience is not learned but inherited, passed down from ancestors who would track prey for days. Their precision is not calculated but felt, an intuitive understanding of physics that bypasses conscious thought. Their psychological impact is not planned but emergent, a natural consequence of their ability to write stories with trajectories in time. The final section of his report was the hardest to write, the part that had convinced him to retire. We have approached human snipers as a military phenomenon to be studied, a tactical advantage to be countered. This fundamental misunderstanding has cost us dearly. They are not merely soldiers with exceptional skills. They are the purest expression of humanity's place in the cosmos, creatures who have learned to turn distance itself into an art form. Melther added the last paragraph with a sense of finality that resonated through his entire being. The question is not why human snipers are the most feared in the galaxy. The question is what it means that such creatures evolved at all. What kind of universe shapes a species to perceive space, time, and causality with such intimate precision? Perhaps we fear human snipers not because of what they can do, but because they show us a truth about existence itself, that reality is far more mutable, far more interconnected, and far more mysterious than we ever imagined. The archivist sealed the report with his highest security clearance. As he prepared to leave his post for the last time, a small alert caught his attention. The trajectory calculations for the archive station's orbit had been adjusted, compensating for a gravitational anomaly that their systems hadn't even detected yet. The source of the correction, a human sniper instructor who had noticed the irregularity through their scope from 3 light minutes away. They had literally seen the future in the stars and reshaped it with a single observation. Melther added one final note. We do not fear them because they can kill us. We fear them because they understand the universe in ways we never will.